What's up everybody, it's Matt from Peter Glenn, and in this video we're going to show you how to mount a binding for the standard 4x4 hole pattern. Let's check this out. Alright, so we're going to get these new bindings mounted on your brand new board. And the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you've got a screwdriver that has a nice big head. You don't want something too small, so you don't want to run the risk of stripping out your screws. The other thing you want to do too is you want to figure out what your stance width and what your stance angles are. And if you don't know what that is, check the link in the description down below to another video that kind of tells you all about that. Definitely a very, very important thing to know. So me, I ride about a 22.5 to 23 inch stance. So basically what I'm gonna do, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna go ahead and take this pad. Most bindings have a pad or some sort of a cover that goes over their discs just to kind of clean things up a little bit, add some cushion, kind of help keep the snow from sticking to the discs. But if it doesn't, it's not a big deal. This is not something that you absolutely have to have. Some of them snap in, some of them screw in like this ride one, but you want to remove that and you basically want to get that hole open so you can put your disc in there, because the binding cannot mount without this disc. Now, we're gonna mount on the 4x4 hole pattern. So another video that we do have is all about hole patterns if you're not sure. But basically the 4x4 hole pattern is going to be 4 screws in a perfect square. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get that binding set, both the front and the back. So we're obviously gonna unscrew this and pull the pad out of that one as well. So basically what we're gonna do is we get both bindings set kind of within the area of where we think they might go. Now, this board does have reference stance, and a lot of boards do have that too, where they'll actually tell you if you mount on these holes here and here, then your stance is gonna be at this measurement. So this board actually has a 21.7 inch stance at reference stance. So I know that if I mount on the inserts that the little arrows on the reference pointer pointing at here and here, I'm gonna be at 21. But me, I actually ride just a little bit bigger than that. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna move the binding kind of towards the next set of inserts. Now, depending on your binding, if you actually have a adjustable heel loop on your binding, sometimes there are some adjustments and you can actually slide the binding, like with this union disc, you can actually have a little bit of an adjustment side to side. So you could actually mount within the reference points and then slide it to the side. But if you do have a binding with a fixed heel loop, then you're actually gonna need to turn the disc forward and backward, and then you're just gonna adjust side to side on the inserts. Since this one has an adjustable heel loop, I'm gonna leave these side to side. And then again, I'm gonna take it from that 21 and I'm just gonna move it out a little bit. And then I'm gonna take that one and I'm gonna move that one out a little bit. And now I'm gonna take my tape measure and always double check. The whole measure twice, cut once. And you're gonna measure from the middle of the binding to the middle of the binding. And I see that that's 23 inches. And I know that that's centered up, so I know that that's actually gonna ride the way I want it to ride on this board. So this is a twin tip board, and most of the time you are gonna be riding in the center of a twin tip board. Most of those stances are gonna be quote unquote centered up, but you don't have to. If you like to have just a little bit more nose than tail, there's nothing wrong with that. Having more nose than tail actually adjusts your side cut a little bit, and it actually can make the board ride a little bit different and can make it perform a little bit better one way than the other way. So if you like that twin centered up stance, no problem. Just because the stance is centered up means you have to ride the board centered up. Also, if the board does have a setback, and that basically means that the inserts are actually mounted back just a little bit from the center of the board, you can move it forward a little bit. The only thing that you're not gonna do is you're not gonna ride with more tail than nose. You're either gonna be centered up or you're gonna have more nose. So once we get that set, now we gotta figure out our angles. So really, really easy. When you're basically going to figure out the angles, it's funny, I've been doing this for 28 years now, and I couldn't even tell you which way to move. If you handed me a binding and said, move the disc so it's gonna move positive angle, I couldn't do it without having the board right in front of me. But the easy way to do it, and kind of the little hack to do that, is basically take your binding, set it so the disc is at 0. There'll be a little arrow on the binding and you'll see 0 degrees on the disc. And then what you're gonna do is, this is my back binding, and I actually ride a little bit forward on both of my bindings. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna move the binding in the direction that I want it to go. And then you're basically gonna take the disc and move it back. So that's kind of like the cheating way to figure out your angle on your binding. So once you have that angle figured out, now it's super, super easy. We're basically going to take the screws and get them started. We're gonna put one in, get it going with just your fingertips and don't tighten it down at all. And then I always go kind of in the X pattern. I go this way and then I'll come up and do this one. And then I'll go down and do this one. So once you get them all started, they will go in easily. That's a good thing to note. You shouldn't have to force them in. Sometimes bindings might have some bushings on the bottom, and if the threads aren't grabbing at all, one thing that you can do is actually take a screw without a washer, put it in there, and again, get it started, and it'll go in easily. You should only need to use your fingers and pull the disc into the binding and kind of smash down the bushings or smash down that rubber or whatever. Then go ahead and put your second screw in with the washer, get all of them started, and then take the one out without the washer and throw it back in with a washer. But you're gonna want those washers in all 4 of your screws. So once you get them all started, now all you're gonna do is basically crank those things down. And I always basically kind of get them with just my fingers with one hand, just kind of get them snug. And then once you have them all snug, I like to go back and give them one last little crank. Give it a firm grip on the screwdriver and give it one last little crank. Now you don't have to crank these things down to within an inch of their life. They're actually gonna hold. You just wanna make sure that they're very, very snug. Make sure that the binding's not moving and it's ready to go. Then all you gotta do is move to your other binding and you're gonna do the exact same thing. Basically, move it to the angle that you want, get it set, put your screws in and crank them down. Then once you've got everything all set and ready to go, you're just gonna go ahead and reinstall your footbed. Again, whether it's a screw, sometimes it's a cover that flips up and snaps down, but just make sure that you've got that cover on the binding, especially if it's something that's as thick as this ride one where you're gonna notice a big, big difference. Sometimes if it's just a plate that goes over the disc, you're probably not gonna notice that because your heel and your balls of your feet are actually what's touching the binding, so anything in the middle you're not gonna notice. Those are usually just there, again, just to kind of fill up that area, make it look clean, and also help kind of keep some snow from sticking to the binding. So another good thing to note too is that there are some bindings that actually have a 4x2 disc. Now this actually still mounts on this exact same hole pattern. The 4x4 hole pattern is, again, that perfect square, but these mini discs are smaller and they will mount on the inserts that are right next to each other. They're gonna mount here, they're not gonna mount here. So one thing that is good to note, that if you do buy a binding and it says that it's 4x2 compatible, but it's not 4x4 compatible, that means that you're not gonna be able to put it on an old board that is missing these inserts that are in between. But again, go head over to our video about the hole patterns if you've got any questions about that. But the majority of the boards on the market nowadays are this 4x2 hole pattern, which is compatible with 4x4 and 4x2 discs. So then going back to that fixed heel loop binding, if you do have a binding where your base plate and your heel loop are one piece, you're gonna need to set your disc with those slots going forward, backward. We do need to have our foot centered up on the board, one of the most important things ever. And we'll leave a link in the description to the video about how to adjust your bindings to fit your boots properly. But to get that adjustment with that fixed heel loop binding, you're gonna need to actually be able to slide that disc forward and backward to center your foot up, whereas you can go side to side with the adjustable heel loop, and then you're gonna center your foot up with the heel loop itself. So as you can see, it's actually really easy to get your board set up. Once you know a lot of the little things, once you know what your stance width is, and you know your angles, really all you need is a screwdriver and a tape measure, and you can get this thing ready to go. But if you got any questions beyond what we talked about in the video, definitely leave some comments down below. We're on there every single day trying to answer your questions. We want to make sure we can get you into some rad gear, but most importantly, we want to make sure that it's going to fit you, it's going to fit your riding style, and it's going to work properly for you too. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, and definitely get that notification bell on too so you can find out when all the new videos drop. Grab yourself a new board, new set of bindings, get that thing mounted up, and get out and ride, because any day of riding is a good day of riding.